And that was Charmaine Campbell-Patton talking to you from Minneapolis. This is Michael Quinn-Patton coming to you from northern Minnesota. Welcome to the book club. We're going to be looking today at the cross-silos principle, engaging across sectors and issues for systems change. And we're going to have a special guest participant in this. Andrea Lisa will join us shortly and present on some of her perspective on these issues, which she's been deeply engaged with Blue Marble evaluation, and developmental evaluation, principles-focused evaluation, and I'm delighted that she's willing today to share with us some of her engagement with these issues of equity and sustainability. So I'm going to do a quick overview of how I see the issue and have Andrea Lisa share her perspectives, and then we're going to today provide some time for small groups, breakout groups, for you to talk with each other about this and report back instead of just doing traditional Q&A. So this is about getting across silos. I'm in part of northern Minnesota that is farm country, and I am surrounded by these large grain silos that store corn and soybeans, and they keep them separate so that they will dry out. So there are purposes for silos, but when they become programs and projects that are not in communication with each other, not supporting each other, and autonomous, it can create some dysfunctions around efforts at systems change. And Blue Marble evaluation is about systems change. So today we're going to focus on evaluation for equity and justice, and view equity and justice as historical and traditional silos in evaluation. Much of the cross-silos work in Blue Marble evaluation is looking across programs, across sectors, across agencies, across the private sector and the nonprofit sector and the public sector. But today we're going to focus on conceptual and activist silos of equity and justice. And this goes back to evaluation's beginning, the Great Society War on Poverty programs in the United States, where equity was the driving force. It wasn't called equity in those days. It was called reducing poverty. And now we're in the current time where, after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, the social justice uprising around the world has focused new and renewed attention on issues of systemic injustice, a systems perspective on injustice. We also have the growing evidence about the health disparities that accompany the coronavirus. Blacks are twice as likely to get COVID and die from it as whites. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And so that's a global commitment. At the same time, demonstrations go back into around anti-racism, go back a long ways, and get renewed periodically as efforts make to change what's going on. The 2014 Evaluation Conference has as a theme sustainable, equitable future, combining those. But for the most part, it's been a matter of these silos being separated. The Equity Evaluation Initiative asks the question, what might be possible if evaluation was conceptualized, implemented, and utilized in a manner that promotes equity? An evaluation of the global pandemic has made equity one of the concerns in looking at the coronavirus. Flattening the curve has both equity and sustainability dimensions to it. And we're in infodemia, where there's a lot of bad information out there, wrong information, misleading information that complicates our ability to deal with these issues. So we're going to be, for a long time now, in a post-normal world with post-normal evaluation needing to engage in a different way. Peter Drucker said famously, and I've used this quote a number of times, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. Blue Marble evaluation then, in looking across silos, is attempting to integrate. The yin-yang principle is an attempt to integrate, to look at the way in which climate change is accelerating, what's called the hockey stick formation. And the Oxford Word of the Year, climate emergency, where we know that the future sustainability of humanity is at stake with the climate emergency. And it has tended to be separate groups working on social justice issues versus those working on the climate emergency. As this photograph shows, the climate emergency has been very much characterized as a white middle-class movement. The social justice uprising had involved more people of color, and especially Black Lives Matter and the African American movement. And so the climate emergency as a overarching frame for the issues around justice and equity becomes part of the issue of how we cross silos. Another quote that I've used regularly: we are the first generation to know that we are destroying the planet and the last generation that can do anything about it. So Blue Marble evaluation is both dealing with sustainability and dealing with equity, where climate change looms over the battle with the coronavirus as the next global emergency. And the social justice uprising is a part of that. And we have to act quickly, time being of the essence. Act with a sense of urgency in the present. Support adaptive sustainability long-term, grounding both in understanding the past. So cross silos includes interconnecting the Sustainable Development Goals. It means moving beyond those separations and viewing things more holistically and systemically. Bruce Mao, a Canadian designer and educator, said, when everything is connected to everything else, for better or worse, everything matters. And that hopefully means evaluation matters. So in the Prague meeting of the International Development Evaluation Association, where they adopted a declaration at the end, included the mandate that all evaluations should include a focus on sustainability. We commit to evaluating for social, economic, and for social, environmental, and economic sustainability and transformation, including by assessing contextual factors and systemic changes. We commit to assessing and highlighting in all evaluations unintended negative social, economic, and environmental effects. At the same time, the emphasis on equity, diversity, and inclusion is calling for evaluation to look at how transformational engagement manifests the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and evaluate whether, how, and to what extent transformational engagement enhances systems-level diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Equitable Evaluation Initiative is advocating that all evaluations should address equity. And certainly inequity has been growing. Oxfam produced a report for Davos last January that the number of billionaires has doubled in the past decade. At least 119 billionaires worth about $500 billion attended Davos this year. 2,153 billionaires have more wealth than the 4.6 billion poorest people on the planet. Sustainable, equitable future. And that's where environmental justice comes, is one of the places to be able to merge these separate issues. There's a strong social justice stream in evaluation. There's a strong sustainability stream in evaluation, but they tend to involve different people, different topical interest groups, different sessions at AEA conferences. In the New Directions I edited around Paulo Freire's work called Pedagogy of Evaluation, Paulo Freire, the great Brazilian philosopher and educator, was an early advocate of both equity and sustainability. He wrote in his final book how urgent it is that we fight for more fundamental ethical principles such as respect for the life of human beings, the lives of animals, of birds, and for the life of rivers and forests. I do not believe in loving among women and men, among human beings, if we do not become capable of loving the world. Ecology has gained tremendous importance at the end of the century. It must be present in any educational practice of a radical, critical, and liberating nature. And so the challenge of cutting across these silos toward an environmental justice that integrates our concerns with equity and our concerns with sustainability is one of the challenges for Blue Marble evaluation in particular, and evaluation in general. And so with that introduction and overview, I'm going to invite Angelisa to come on and share some of her thoughts and experiences, and then we'll give you a chance to interact in groups. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, Angelisa, and we invite you to tell folks where you're coming from, both physically and evaluatively.
Okay.
And you can share your screen.
I will do. Hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to be speaking with you today. This is an incredible opportunity. And before I do my screen share, I'd just like everybody to either in the chat or if you're on video, I'd just like everybody to raise your hand if you feel that you are one of the richest people in the world, in your own value system, in your own sense of what enriches your life. And of course, it's not just money. So I'm putting up 2 hands because through this entire coronavirus crisis / cosmic opportunity, I've been so aware of how completely blessed and rich I am. And even my dog, look at this, my dog over here, who's working with me all the time. I mean, everything that brings you love, everything that brings you that feeling of being connected and of having a positive exchange of energy is part of our wealth. And so when we think about wealth and inequity of wealth, I think we do ourselves an injustice if we look at only billionaires as the richest people in the world, because they're not necessarily the happiest, and also not to discount that freedom from any kind of constraint of your choices and liberties is an impact on your wealth. So I'm coming from Nova Scotia, Canada, which is the traditional territory, unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and I'd like to open with a land acknowledgement from a colleague I've been learning from, one of several that you'll meet in the next few minutes, Kim Scott. And I will be sharing this, this deck through Charmaine, and there is a link to one of her Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation articles so that you can learn more from her thinking. And so, the question of why do we in Canada and other places who are working actively on decolonization, truth and reconciliation, why do we start with a land acknowledgement? And it always has to be tied with an action, with a commitment to doing better together and being, in my area of Canada, we're under the Peace and Friendship Treaty. So how do we return back to peace and friendship in a sense of mutualism? And repair the legacy of our exceptionalist and extractive colonial legacy. So Kim says, because culture lives in language, and if we want to change a person, community, or nature, we have to collectively say something new. These are land acknowledgements, are the beginning of kitchen table conversations where relationships can change. They expand the idea of relationship to include the peoples with the land. They bring visibility to the sustainable nature of relationship with the land. And land acknowledgements also take note of all the animals and inanimate glory that Mother Earth brings to our lives. While we speak about a new relationship with each other, let's not forget the truth that is abundantly clear in this moment. We do not own the land, we belong to her. And in this regard, we are all indigenous to somewhere. So wherever you might call the lands to which you may belong, acknowledge its life-giving force. So Kim was, she said this on a webinar on June 6th this year, and she is Anishinaabe. She's a woman who's Anishinaabe in Kitigan Zibi in the Boreal bioregion. So let me just give you another taste of Kim's wisdom, connecting these topics of social justice and environmental conservation. And I need to advance my slide. I thank you for your, there we go. Is this working? No, I might have to reshare, sorry. Okay. So what I think I'm gonna say, new share.
Yeah, you may have to stop sharing and then share again.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry, guys. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go low tech now. So are we good? Am I not screen sharing now?
We're seeing you.
Okay, but you're not seeing my screen share, right?
No.
Okay, so I think I'm just going to go, because I want to be time efficient, and I will share the deck afterwards. But so Kim Scott recently did a article for the Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation on reconciliation and energy democracy. And she is very much living with excitement into the next 25 years of clean energy transition to a green economy with an emphasis on Indigenous clean energy leaders. So I welcome you to check out her work on that. And I'd like to, if I can, I'd like to just share some life-changing moments in my own journey and in the people that I've been learning from, that I've been blessed to learn from. So I have had some crises of faith that have broken me open in my practice. And one of them was after about 10 years of working as an Indigenous Services Canada evaluation advisor. I was challenged by another European Canadian evaluator to use an Indigenous lens. And I had to say, quite honestly, I don't have one. I'm not Indigenous. And I said, without irony, do you have one, as in like a policy lens? And that sort of launched my awareness that my knowledge was so incomplete, and I didn't even know the search terms or the authors to look to even find what it was that I didn't know. And so I actually was able to work with an Indigenous cultural mentor who's an emerging evaluator, Stephanie Francis, in 2017 for about 5 months. And in the first little while, we worked together 24/7. She lived with me, and I was teaching her some of Michael's teachings on developmental evaluation, which she said was the closest thing to her own understanding of inquiry that she'd seen in evaluation literature that was non-Indigenous. And she helped me see my own worldview, and she helped me become familiar with the doctrine of discovery and the language of the doctrine of discovery that is this myth that pervades so much of our theory, so much of our language, and the idea that we're all treaty people and that Indigenous people are not just another minority. They have distinct treaty rights that are legally binding. And this is why Indigenous evaluation and UNDRIP are so important as a legal framework. And so in the deck, I will share some information from some literature from Nicole Bowman, who I've also been blessed to learn a lot from lately and work with, in the idea of moving from human activity, humans as an invasive species. And if you have this image, it's not that a species is inherently invasive, but the behavior of a species that's out of balance with its environment, that moves to a new environment where it hasn't actually established right relationship with the rest of life in that environment. It ends up being a destructive trajectory that is extractive based on exceptionalism. And how do we go from that relationship that has brought us to the Anthropocene through ecocide and genocide, and now collective suicide is the reality that we're all facing. And so UNDRIP is based on land rights, so that First Nation people as sovereign nations can be controlling their land and water and health decisions and education decisions and everything in order to build up sovereignty again, everything that colonizers deliberately attacked, because they knew that if you take away social equity, then that would give them access to the natural resources, not relatives in the colonial worldview that they wanted to exploit. And so it's not new, this understanding of the interconnectedness between interspecies equity and intraspecies equity, social equity, and equity where we don't think only of humans as persons, but the personhood of non-humans as relatives. So going from being an invasive species to being in right relationship and behaving as good relatives with mutually beneficial regenerative impacts. And so this is how the cross silo principle actually helps us look how we've siloed things, humans versus nature, and we see actually we are part of nature, or indigenous people with indigenous issues in indigenous communities versus settler, and we realize, ooh, all settlers are actually also in indigenous spaces, and that the issues are actually settler issues and colonization issues. And so that we own that and we see what we have in common across the silos to work together for mutual benefit. And so I realized that I want to not take too much space, and at the same time, I wanted to amplify Stephanie Francis Nanwe Pahana, who has a trajectory of evaluation as a tool for power. She's Maori, and it very much aligns with a trajectory of ecological design, whereby an exceptionalist, colonizing, win-lose design actually causes so much harm and requires so much energy input and resources, versus a mutually reinforcing regenerative design. And that in the middle, where we aim to be 100% less harmful to the natural environment in the ecological trajectory, and in terms of social justice, as colonizers, 100% less harmful in the systemic discrimination and bias and the barriers that we put in place to the thriving and the regeneration of Indigenous people. And that's, so I've had another crisis of faith when I realized that as an evaluator, the best I can do in my job with Indigenous clients is be 100% less harmful, unless I am actually supporting the conditions within which Indigenous people can be evaluating by and as Indigenous people with Indigenous worldview. It goes way beyond the method choice. So, and in that way, in that de-anthropocentric worldview, de-anthropocentrizing the value proposition from, okay, what's the threshold of value and return for humans, to how are we caring for each other as relatives in our natural environment. The idea even of separating equity and sustainability for me, where the equity and the dignity, the survival, dignity, and well-being of all people and persons, for me, respecting nature and the personhood of nature actually extends that to interspecies and intergenerational equity. Same thing with sustainability, cultural sustainability, linguistic sustainability, all of that is also inherently connected to environmental sustainability. So that's my take.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Very inspirational and informative and timely and inspiring. We have Khalil Bitar with us as well, who is one of the leaders of Evaluation Youth, and we weren't sure he was going to be able to join us, but he is. And so I want to invite Khalil to share his perspective on the relationship between equity and sustainability as he works with it and experiences it. Khalil, tell us where you're coming from.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Khalil Bitar. I am from Palestine, now in Germany. I am the chair of Evaluate Global Network, a network of young and emerging evaluators. Thank you, Michael and Charmaine, for this stage to share some of my thinking. Michael and Charmaine asked me to speak a little bit about potential cooperation that we work together, and also with my colleague Sausan from Jordan from Evaluate, who we're working on intergeneration evaluation. Another silo that we are thinking to at least offer some ways to break it or think about it. I think from my perspective, and this is also in the book, the more diversity we have in the world, the more silos which we, a human being, make. Things are not silo in nature. In nature, everything, if one species or some animals were taken away from nature, the whole system becomes, a little bit fragile. But we human beings like to put things in silo, and academic institutions do just that by specialization and narrowing specialization. So you have the most narrow specialization now than ever before, where we read about scientists 200, 300 and more years, they were specializing in very different specialization, and they were doing fine. So I think with this specialization makes us, with the silo even stronger. And now let's see how with COVID and what's going on with COVID-19 and the whole interracial or racial justice in the US, and with unemployment, and how everything is connected. Everything is connected, and that's why one problems need to another. Well, one thinker, author, and scholar who has been, perhaps more than anyone else speaking about this through Blue Marble, but so many books before, was Michael Quinn-Button. As younger evaluator and Evaluate, we are inspired by this book because we think evaluators in specific, although we are specialists, but we are also scientists, we have to offer to the people we work with, but also the society overall, this perspective of trying to break the silos. And one way of this cross silo or is the intergeneration one, not often spoken about. We usually hear about the racial silos, economic silos, and environmental, but how much cooperation between people from different groups working together, not only in evaluation. Sometimes you see it's not happening a lot. So hopefully this cooperation will show, even in the blog post at the moment, shows that there are potential for intergeneration cooperation, and maybe something that evaluators can also benefit from. But overall, I am very excited about today and about this discussion, and I'm sure from our own background, as Andreas just said, the silos about the native versus others, and like how we always do silos in different ways, and just the fact that we are here and speaking and trying to find ways to integrate, not separate, and break things down, it's very good. Just last to share something from a book I'm reading about, it's called Anti-Fragile. And actually the same author, Nassim Taleb, has I'm sure you read the book of Michael Quinn-Button and his Skin in the Game. That's another title for the author, but this author talks about, in Anti-Fragile, he shows how there are mechanical and non-complex systems and the organic and complex systems. A lot of the human interventions are always more mechanical and non-complex, but complicated, where the organic are complex, but they are not mechanical. And for us, it's so much easier to understand the system that are mechanical and think of them as stages or log frame, or, you know, and not looking at the organic. And the book, Michael's book really offers this, to look at things not mechanically. I will share also a link now, just from Michael's contribution for the Eval for Action campaign, where he talks about this. And in the chapter, as you know, he has also a big section about the SDGs and how so many people saying the SDGs as 1 to 17 and not mixing together, where Michael actually always speak about how they are integrated and how to see the whole thing together. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the stage again. And I'm very enthusiastic about the conversation and connecting with all of you. Thank you, Michael and Charmaine.
Thank you, Khalil, both of you. Tremendous additions to the conversation. Charmaine, do you want to pull up the poll? We're going to get some feedback from you, and then I'll give you a few minutes in small groups together to discuss this. So here's a poll. If you'll each respond to it. Just click on whichever one of these is closest to your own sense of priority. Come on, everybody, weigh in.
Okay, I'm sharing the results.
And I'm getting knocked off here. So what we want to do is put you into groups to give you a chance to both discuss these results, but more generally to talk with each other about how you see the traditional gaps between social justice evaluation, sustainability evaluation, the different movements, the social justice uprising, the global emergency uprising, and where you see opportunities and have thoughts about whether and how they might be integrated around something like environmental justice. So Charmaine's going to put you in small groups. We're going to give you 15 minutes to talk to each other. Please introduce yourselves to each other and get each other's perspectives, and then we'll come back at 10 minutes till the hour and have time to hear some of the major themes that you came up with, if you'll identify a reporter from each group.
Okay, in just a moment, you will be assigned to a group, and just click accept, and we'll give you a warning when you're halfway, and then when you are going to be pulled back in.
Welcome back, everybody. And let's hear from some of you about a key point or insight or issue or question that came up for your group. Anybody can go. Somebody unmute and tell us what you talked about. What your main takeaway was. We need to be short. We've got 9 minutes here.
Sasan, would you like to, or would you rather I go?
No, you can go ahead. You took the notes.
Okay. So the key things that really emerged from our group was that we all are really wanting to break down these silos and to kind of be pioneers in coming out of our fields of understanding to create a future where all people are thriving and communities are vital, and that social equity is embedded in that future. And that we also take the time to breathe and to reconcile within ourselves and with the land and with our history, because we see this time of crisis being the saying "I can't breathe" is really a symptom of both the coronavirus and the virus of racism.
And pollution. Thank you. Another group?
Yeah, I am. Let me put on the video. Yeah, I'm Naresh Singh. I was in group 5. And we talked mainly about how to cross silos in practical evaluations. And the main point being, when you are, for example, an evaluation consultant, you are given TORs, and those TORs are typically siloed, difficult to get out of them because that's your marching order, so to speak. When you have a chance to do an inception report for the evaluation, there might be an opportunity to blend that a little bit and build in a little bit more systems thinking, but typically very limited room. So that the key point then is, what are the opportunities in the real world for us to do this kind of work? And it might be in places like academia, in places where you are an evaluation manager, and in areas in which the evaluation itself allows that kind of systemic approach. If it were, for example, of the SDGs or some issue that was cross-sectoral. But so the big challenge to all of this work would be, how do we progressively change the world in which both managers and commissioners of evaluation, as well as practitioners, begin to use this kind of work? Thank you.
Thank you. And I've done a blog and I've written an article that will be coming out in the American Journal of Evaluation on transformational criteria that include equity and sustainability, and arguing that those need to become routine in the commissions of evaluation. So you're quite right. If the terms of reference are too narrow, it's hard to introduce those things. And one of the areas that the principles of our profession and the emergencies call on us to do is to try to change the TORs, is to get criteria in the TORs that include attention to both equity and sustainability. We've got time for another couple reports out.
I was in a group with Robin and Dr. Patton, and one of the things Robin brought up was the whole idea of how you have different scientific communities and how those are all in different silos, but that even in the social justice silo and if you think about climate science silo, she's coming from the CDC and is more in health and the social justice, but she still thinks because of how climate change is affecting health, you tend to have more maybe windows in that silo. Whereas the climate scientists, being more natural scientists, maybe it's more of a solid wall. And breaking that down by bringing in the social movements, the social justice concerns, being able to read about white fragility and knowing that whiteness is not representative of humanity. That was in addition to the criteria, talking about those different criteria, that's what our discussion revolved around.
Thank you. We have one more.
Hi, we had a conversation about the UNDRIP ideas of focus on survival, dignity, and well-being, and acknowledging that all of us want to maintain our own dignity and our sense of well-being even in these difficult conversations. And so there's an element of informed consent and also support that's required in anti-racism conversations. And I would also say in conversations where we're coming to terms that we have the blood of Gaia on our hands collectively, and that it's now threatening our existence. These are not easy things to talk about, and so it requires safe spaces, and safe spaces for everybody, and a little bit of I think informed consent and support of each other, because we're talking about root values and breaking open. And so there was some conversation about that we all need what we believe to be held honored, even while we can't impose that, because it's not our, I can't impose that because it's not my turn. As a white person in a lot of the conversations that I'm having, both environmental and social equity.
Very nice. That's very helpful. And evaluation itself has been challenged to create spaces where people can have authentic conversations about strengths and weaknesses and data. And this elevates what it means to have safe places where people can have those difficult conversations. And we may be in a position of being able to facilitate some of that. Well, thank you all for being a part of today's book club webinar. Special thanks to Andrea Lisa and Kalar for helping us frame this and provide their insights from different parts of the world. And we appreciate you all being part of this. We'll have another book club next month on time being of the essence, and go more deeply into how do we deal with the emergency side of the global emergency from a blue marble perspective. We wish you all a good weekend. Stay safe, stay strong, and hope to have you back next month. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.